Title of this morning's message, you see it up here, Moses and his rock. When I mention these two words, I want to ask, what is the first thing that pops into your mind, the two words that make up our title, Moses and rock? Think about it for a moment. First thing that pops into your mind, don't tell me out loud things, but just think about it. The thing that pops into your mind. Well, if you've been anywhere around church and in Sunday school, immediately it was probably the same thing for all of us, wasn't it? That situation in what was called the wilderness of Zin, recorded for us in Numbers chapter 20, the fateful day that Moses and the thirsty Israelites came to this place. And the people were complaining. They were blaming Moses, they were blaming Aaron, and things were not going well. Their circumstances were not well, and their circumstances affected their feelings and affected how they perceive things. And so they came after Moses and Aaron as leaders. And so Moses went to God, and God told him, all right, gather the congregation, bring them over here to this rock, and when you do that, you speak to that rock, and I'll bring forth water out of the rock to feed their beasts, their animals, and give them a drink too. When we know what happens, what plays out, Moses' faith falters, if we might describe it as such. He gathers the people, and he comes to the rock, and instead of speaking to it, what does he do? Let's try it again. Instead of speaking to it, what does he do? He hits it, right? He strikes it, and so forth. And a good old picture of that, right? We know the story well. And immediately water comes gushing out, and you can imagine the joy and the excitement of the people in that day, in that moment. As the water comes out, they've been thirsty, struggling in the desert there. And this was a great miracle, but it was, for Moses, a terrible day. He had failed in his faith. In taking God at His word, and in doing so, he forfeited the privilege of taking the Jews into the promised land, of seeing it himself, gazing upon it in person in the land. It was lost. And indelibly for the rest of eternity, as long as the Bible shall stand, and my friend, it will last forever, the reality is this, as long as this book is around, guess what? He lives in infamy with this rock. Moses and the rock. As the Israelites no doubt thought about it and heard about it, I should say, the judgment that befell him, you can imagine their response. From then on, and they would only think of that rock and Moses and the failure. That rock of Meribah, location where it was. For you and I, we think of that situation and immediately our minds run to his failure and this rock, his rock, if we might call it that. I often wonder if over in that area, all those who love to make money off tourists have already labeled a rock as Moses' rock. I can see street vendors there along the side setting little chips off of a rock and labeled as a chip of Moses' rock. You can imagine that the story went, and as one generation came and another generation came on the scene as they wandered in the wilderness, that they told the story. Well, yeah, man, can't wait till we go in. But remember Moses? He can't go in because of the rock. Remember the rock, Moses' rock? He hit it when he should have spoke to it. He didn't obey God, and boy, indelibly connected. So when they thought of Moses and they even brought up the word rock, immediately this one of Meribah came to their minds. As those years passed, though, the generation passed away, a new generation of Jews came along, and they were ready to enter the promised land. It came time for Moses to go off the scene. He begins to tell them of his rock. In fact, he begins to speak in a wonderful way of his rock. See, in Deuteronomy chapter 31, we're in chapter 32, but in chapter 31, he's called the people together. He's preparing them to give a farewell speech. He gives a little bit of it already. God says, all right, I want you and Joshua to come before the tabernacle. And in a sense, Joshua is being commissioned to take over the leadership of the Jews, the Israelites, to bring them into the promised land. And we come to the end of chapter 31, and we find an interesting verse there in verse 30. It talks about the song of Moses. He shares with Israel a song. Doing so, I always think of the terminology swan song. And very much this was Moses' swan song. This is his last instructions to the people of Israel. The generation that would enjoy and be able to experience something their parents did not because of their failure of faith as they went into the promised land. In this song, he rehearses all the goodness of his God in their ears. He reminds them of his great deeds, the many ways they found him to be faithful down through the years. But in it, he shines the spotlight on his great rock, the rock of Moses. I love how he starts it. Look at chapter 32, if you will, with me, of Deuteronomy. Look at verse 1. Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak. Hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop as the rain. My speech shall distill as the dew. As the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. Because I will publish the name of the Lord. Ascribe ye greatness unto our God. Then he starts, and here's where he really introduces a theme of his song. Now, we all think of the rock of Moses. Oh, that's that rock in Meribah. He hit it. He didn't speak to it. That's, oh yeah, we know about Moses and his rock. And he's standing before the people and he's saying this. No, let me tell you about my rock. Let me tell you about my rock. Look at verse number 4. Notice what he says. He is the rock. Notice the capitalized R, will you? He is the rock. His work is perfect. For all his ways are judgment, a God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. Do you understand this morning that when Moses reaches the end of his life and he speaks to this next generation that's going to enter the promised land, do you realize that the rock that he wants to be associated with is not the rock of Meribah, there in the wilderness of Zin. The rock that he wants them to remember him by is the rock, his God. God is my rock. He's been the rock of Israel, he says here. He is the one that I ran to often. He is the one that I've always found to be faithful. He is the rock. We have a song in our hymn book, Rock of Ages. He is the rock through every age. And this is what Moses wants his attention to. I find it interesting because reality is this. When you and I mention Moses, we mention a rock, we think immediately of that one in Meribah. Reality is, when it comes to the end of Moses' life, he's not thinking about the rock of Meribah. He's thinking about the rock of ages. He wants you to remember that there was someone who was faithful to him down through it all. He wants you to remember that the only way that he accomplished anything for God, the only thing that got him through every day, was his rock. The rock known as God. And I would ask you this morning, is he your rock? I mean, really, what is your rock today? What gets you through? What has priority in your life that provides your every need? What is the rock you run to? He carries this theme through it. You see, verse number 4, he identifies God as the rock. Verse 15, he calls him the rock of my salvation. Verse number 18, he says he is the rock that begat thee. He is the rock that gives you life and energy. He is the rock that begets thee. Verse 30, identifies him as the rock that both delivers his people and also judges his people. Great verse there. He talks about how, remember in past, just a few of you chased away the enemy. Well, God can flip that when he has to judge you. Just a few enemies can chase away Israelites. How does that happen? Because he is the rock that both delivers and judges his own. In verse 31, great truth too. We'll get more to that verse in a moment. He is the rock that is greater than any other rock. You see in these verses, and a song lasts for 40-something verses. Throughout it, this theme is throughout it, the reality that God is my rock. He declares it. Here's the rock of my life. It's not the one that gushed water because I hit it. It's not the rock where I failed, but the rock that is with me through all my life. Can I ask you again this morning in application of this truth, what or who is your rock today? Not just in word, but in practice. It is easy to sing Rock of Ages, but hardly ever find yourself in the rock. What's the thing or person who's the rock of your life? And You say, well, what good is a rock? What purpose does a rock so serve? Well, think about the Jews in Moses' day. They would have understand the benefits, shall we put it as such, of the rock there in the desert, in the wilderness, their life in Egypt during their sojourn. So what is it that a rock can do for you and I? Well, to help us understand that, we look to another man who likewise called his God a rock. David said this, "He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him." He didn't do anything wrong. He has the perfect intent and purpose for me. There is nothing that God, in His will and what He allows in my life that is wicked, unkind, that's unthoughtful. No. There's no unrighteousness with Him. And didn't David know something about a rock? Think about it with me. When David was fleeing for his life, he hid among the rocks. He understood literally what a physical rock could provide and take care of him. He hid in the rock at times, right? He was in the caves hiding from Saul and his soldiers as they tried to kill him and remove him from the face of the earth. David understood what a rock was, what a rock could do, the benefits of a rock, we might put it that way. And so it would help us to consider for a few moments this morning, how is a rock beneficial and how is God like that rock? If both David and even, we'll see in a moment, Isaiah alludes to this truth too. But if David and Moses both come to the end of their lives and says, listen, through my life, I needed a rock, and that rock was God Almighty. Why did they say that? What was the importance of having God as their rock? Well, I challenge you with 4 thoughts that they bring out. Number 1 is this, a rock is a place that you can hide. It's a place that you can hide. It's a respite. It's an escape, a refuge, a break from life is there. You get to escape the storm. You get to go and get out of the torrential downpour and rain of burdens of life. You get to go there. When we went to Arizona back in August, and we decided to go on a hike. We like hiking as a family, and even though it was the day I think we went 108 degrees outside, we decided to go on a hike. And we did so. It was a little hill, a little mountain, and whatever the case may be. And my whole goal in the hike was to see a rattler. And rattlesnake. I want to see a rattler. It really was. I was hoping. I even said, kids, you should pray that Dad can see a rattlesnake. Some of you are like, that's crazy. I don't want to step on it. I don't want to get hurt. I want to see it down a path, okay? I don't want to be next to it. But I did. I really did. And I'm telling you, we went out on this hike, and it wasn't hardly anything. I was burning up, worn out, hardly several hundred yards into it. Didn't help with my knee and everything else. Nonetheless, but I remember we got to a certain point, and you can imagine the boys were well on ahead, and they had a little outcropping, and the sun was beating down, not a cloud in the sky. It was so hot. And I'll tell you, I was so thankful to find one stone that provided a little bit of shade. And I'll tell you, first thing I did was look to make sure there's no snakes there, and then I went and sat under that rock. Why? Because, boy, that's shadow. Could you imagine walking through that wilderness as an Israelite and that sun beating down, and all of a sudden they came to a huge rock and there was a shadow cast there, and just for a moment be able to hide in the shadow of that rock? Can I tell you, spiritually, Moses said, there were tough days. There were days when the people of Israel, they wanted to stone me. And there was only one place that I could escape to. There's only one place that I could find that I could hide. And that is with my God. My friend, your God is a place to hide. He provides a respite, an escape, if we might put it that way. I like what Psalms 27:5 says, "For in the time of trouble, He shall hide me in His pavilion. In the secret of His tabernacle shall He hide me. He shall set me upon a rock." Psalm 71:3, "Be thou my strong habitation, whereunto I may continually resort." I like that. A resort, a vacation, a place to go where things are taken care of. I don't have to worry about it. Escape from the normal life. That's our God. Where I may continually resort. Thou hast given commandment to save me. For thou art my rock and my fortress. Psalm 94:22 says this, "But the Lord is my defense, and my God is the rock of my refuge." Refuge. He's the place I can run when I need to hide from things going on. I need to cry to somebody. I need to just have a break from this thing called life. I have a rock. That's what Moses says. That's what David says. I can hide there. Number two, a rock is a place where you can find safety. It's a place of defense. It's a place of protection. It's a place where you and I can be vulnerable without concern, without fear. It's a pain-free place. It's a place of healing, refreshment because of that safety. It's a place where you don't have to put up your guard. It's a place where you don't have to fear. You think in the midst of a storm, I've been hiking before, and rain and lightning has come, and we've looked for a outcropping of rocks to find some safety under, or a cave to hide in, things as such. And much the same way, you can imagine Israel, if a storm came out in the middle of the desert, they could be very devastating and such, and to be able to find the shelter in the time of storm. A rock that is a place that I can hide and find safety, where the storms can't touch me. Aren't you thankful today you have a rock where the storms won't touch you? You can run to the rock. You can go to your God who controls the storms. The winds and the waves obey him. You see, David and Moses understood it. Moses in his life, he faced many a storm. There's times where he could have feared for his death, or his life, could have faced death. Yet he understood, as he proclaims here, I have a rock, and there's safety in that rock that I find nowhere else in no other place. Psalm 31:2, bow down thine ear to me, deliver me speedily. He'll deliver us. Be thou my strong rock, a house of defense. He'll protect me. He'll save me. Verse 31:3, for thou art my rock and my fortress, therefore for my name's sake lead me, guide me. He's my rock and my fortress, place of protection. Psalm 61:2, from the end of the earth will I cry unto thee when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. Aren't you grateful today you have a rock that is higher than you? Lead me to the rock that is... I think of the floods. I think of rain and such. And boy, finding a rock that is higher than I, something that outlasts and outshines and more powerful than the waters that threaten to overtake me. The rock that is higher than I. Psalm 62 and verse 6, He only, can you say it today? He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved. You see, we can hide there. We can find safety there. Number three, as even some of these verses have alluded to, I find salvation there. It is a place of salvation, a place of deliverance. He is my daily rescue from life here on earth. He is that deliverance from the mundane, the deliverance from the life without purpose and meaning. He alone gives purpose and meaning to life. He alone describes what true fulfillment is. He alone can rescue us from vain and empty living. Like the verse said above, when I'm overwhelmed, He is my salvation. Psalm 18 verse 46 says, the Lord liveth, and blessed be my rock. Let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth. If He did not live, we would have no rock, but He lives. And blessed be the rock. Lord of my salvation, or let the God of my salvation be exalted. Could you imagine if, as happened, as the Israelites were wandering through the wilderness, there are times that they got attacked by other nations and other people who would decimate them, wipe them off, did not want them to reach the promised land, saw them as a threat, in fact, would not give them permission to travel through their lands. And so they would do whatever it could, whatever it took to destroy them. Can you imagine how many times an enemy was spotted? The scouts came back and said, hey, this nation here is attacking us. They're trying to surround us. And they would have had to find a rock, a place, maybe a high rock where the nation could gather for protection, safety, for deliverance, for salvation. So when Moses talks to the people, said, listen, He is my rock. He is my deliverer. He is the rock of my salvation. He understood that not only in salvation, being saved from hell and to heaven, but also on a daily basis, my friend, I'm grateful we serve a God who saves us, who delivers us from evil and wickedness. And aren't you thankful this week? There's some times where God delivered you from the oppression of Satan. Aren't you thankful that this week there's probably a time that God delivered you from an accident or from something else happened and you and I didn't even know it, but we have a great rock that delivered us, provided salvation for you and I. Psalm 28, David, whether he wrote it or compiled it, as he did all the Psalms, Psalm 28, verse 1, unto thee will I cry, O Lord, my rock. And boy, did David do that often. Unto thee will I cry, O Lord, my rock. Be not silent to me, lest if thou be silent to me, I become like them that go down to the pit. Psalm 89, 26 says, he shall cry unto me, thou art my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation. Psalm 95, 1, O come, let us sing unto the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise unto the rock, or to the rock of our salvation. He is worthy of praise because he is the rock of our salvation. My friend, we can hide there. We find safety there. We find salvation there. But both Moses and certainly David identify we also can find strength there. Strength, the power and the energy to keep on going, to stand strong in the face of life and all the circumstances we find ourselves, to face the overwhelming aspects of life. God is the one to whom we can go and our batteries can truly be charged. You know, sometimes you and I just need to go to God's Word, and may I just say it this way? We need a pep talk spiritually. We need God just to come along and encourage us. We're struggling out on the court. We're not doing well, and things aren't coming together, and you and I need to come outside. We need to come into the presence of God, and we need to find out that God has strength to give. He's got a spiritual pep talk for you and I. He wants to encourage you and I. That is our rock. Psalm 18, verse 2, the Lord is my rock and my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust. My buckler and the horn of my salvation and my high tower. Psalm 62, 7 says, then God is my salvation and my glory, the rock of my strength, and my refuge is in God. The rock of my strength. I ask you again, who or what is your rock today? Would you hold your spot here, and would you turn to Isaiah chapter 32 with me? Hold your spot. We're going to come back to Deuteronomy 32 in just a moment. But would you find Isaiah 32? I don't necessarily have that up on the slide or anything, and so we'll just take a little bit of a side journey, if we could put it this way, rabbit trail, if you will. I want you to see Isaiah chapter 32. It's a great chapter describing and looking ahead to the millennial kingdom of Christ. And Christ as a deliverer and as a king. And you see verse number 1, behold, a king shall reign in righteousness, and princes shall rule in judgment. It's looking ahead. It's millennial kingdom and such, but it's also talking about what Christ is, and certainly not just his physical, earthly kingdom, his spiritual kingdom and such. And in description of here, would you look at verse number 2 with me? Look at verse number 2. Isaiah 32, verse 2. Let's think about this for a moment. Notice what it identifies him as, okay? And a man, he's speaking of Jesus Christ here, and a man shall be a hiding place from the wind. Can we stop there for a second? How hard did the winds blow in your life this week? Storms of life, the circumstances, and pressures and anxieties and the stress of life. How hard did that wind blow this week? Did you need a hiding place? Where'd you find it? Did you find it in a substance? Did you find it in another earthly person? Did you find it in a hobby? Did you find it in the security of finances? Did you find it somewhere other than the man that is a hiding place? He goes on. In a covert from the tempest, a hiding place, a protected place. Where did you go for protection? Where did you go for security this week? Covert from the tempest. As rivers of water in a dry place. Boy, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I can't face this. Who did you go to? Where did you get the living waters from? Where did you get the strength and the energy to face what you had to face this week? Well, just sheer grit. Can I tell you, sheer grit will run out. Just pure inward strength. And I'll tell you, that'll seep out, that'll run out. But my friend, when you go to the rock, there's always enough strength for you. Rivers of water in a dry place. You know, dry place this week? Go to the water that can gush forth and provide. As the shadow, here it is, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. In a weary land this week, facing a lot of difficult things, and life beats you up somewhat, and you're worn out, you're tired, the sun of life is beating down. As the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. So who or what is your rock today? In this journey we call life, I've met so many different people with so many different rocks. For some, it is their own strength, their own abilities, that's their rock. That's what they count on. That's the thing that they run to. For others, it is their last name, their heritage, their inheritance, a powerful name, a well-known name, a name of position, a name that they take pride in. It becomes their rock. The thing they fall back on, the thing that they pull out when they need strength, when they need help, when they need to hide. Still, for others, I've seen that their rock is a member of their family or a friend, a matriarch, a patriarch who is their rock, their anchor, the one person they run to before anything and anyone else. Their rock is a earthly person, another human. For others, their rock is their bank account, their amassed wealth, their great possessions here on earth, the security that they find and the treasures of this place. Still, for others, there's a rock. There's even a spouse, an earthly love of their life upon whom their life rests, one whom they would be lost without in their minds. For others, there's a rock that is a hobby, an activity that fills and consumes their life. It is the thing they run to when they need to escape. When they need energy, they'll run to that hobby or activity. And yet others, their rock is a substance like drugs or alcohol or something else, which becomes the first and the last thing they run to. A place where they frequent that they believe helps them make it through life, stand the storms of life. I fear that too often in our lives, our rock, the place we hide, the place we find safety, the place we look to for salvation, the place we find strength, is something other than the ultimate rock of God. If you're a husband or a wife here today, I sure hope you are a rock for your spouse. But my friend, can I tell you, you will never replace God. Marriage will only be as good as it can be when a husband and a wife both find God as their ultimate rock. You have a matriarch, a patriarch, you have a father, a mother, a grandfather, a grandmother that you look to for everything. You lean upon them for everything. Wonderful. Praise the Lord for that provision. But my friend, can I tell you, they can never replace your God. He is your rock. He alone is the rock that is higher than I and higher than any other. He alone is the one whom I should look to as the greatest rock in my life. And when we come here to the end of Moses' life, whose praises is he singing? Oh, not Aaron's, not the Israelites, not the other leaders, not himself. He goes, no. His song is all about what? His rock. Oh, not the rock at Meribah. Not the one that he hit and instead of speaking to. No. His rock, his God. Can I ask you, when you reach the end of your life, whose praises will you sing? Whose praises will you sing? When your life is drawing to an end, when the curtain begins to close, will it be one of those things I mentioned a moment ago, or will you be singing the praises of your rock, your God? Because all through the wilderness of life, you found him to be faithful. There are days that you just needed to hide, and you found your God. You found the rock of your salvation. You went there. There were days where you just needed the safety, the security of his embrace and his presence. And there were days, multiple days, you ran to his embrace to find safety. There were days when things had overwhelmed you and you needed great deliverance and you needed to be saved from even sometimes your own choices and from your own things in your life. And you found your rock. You ran to him. And there were days where if you were left to stand alone, you could not stand. But oh, how faithful your rock was. He strengthened you. He lifted you up. He set your feet atop the rock that is higher than you. And you made it through this life. And my friend, when you and I come to our deathbed, may you and I sing the praises of our rock. We praise the one who is deserving of it all. Do you remember that verse I alluded to, that very interesting verse number 31? Look back there with me in Deuteronomy, will you? As we draw to a close, Deuteronomy 32, verse 31. This is a most interesting verse. It says this, notice it, for their rock is not as our rock. See, their rock, small r, is not as our rock, capital R, rock. He's different than every other rock that you can name. Every other person, every other thing that you can run to. And notice what it says here. Even our enemies themselves being judges. Now here's a great statement, okay? He points to it. Who does he say is the judge of this? Who is making the determining judgment call? See it in the verse? It's the enemy. Catch that? He said, listen, even the enemies, here, they're the judges here in this verse, and they're the ones that are observing and saying, wow, our rock is not like your rock. Our rock has no comparison to your rock. Even they conclude that our God is a rock for us. And my friend, there are multiple instances of this happening in Scriptures. And I would also say this. There are multiple instances of it happening in your life and mine. Here's what I mean. When the Israelites were running out of Egypt, they were going towards the Red Sea, and you remember the Egyptians, after the death of the firstborn, he had let them go, then Pharaoh got all upset again, followed them, and chasing them now to the Red Sea and such. You remember what happened? Okay, well, I don't have time to look at the passage, but the verse there, Exodus chapter 14, verse 23, says this, and the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea. Okay, so they went in them. Even all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Okay, now, this is building up, right? Because the Jews had just gotten through. They got on the edge there, the other side, and they had followed them in. And the next passage tells us that God had looked upon them through the pillar of fire and such, and the cloud, and excuse me, in the morning watches of the day. And it says this, he troubled the host of Egypt. He troubled their host. Now, how did he trouble them? Do you remember? I love this story. Okay? Because if there's anything that you and I would do that, like God, this is probably it. He looks down in there, and they're going across with their infantry. They're going across with their multiple number of chariots. And God looks down and he goes, okay, I'm going to trouble them. You know what he does? And I can just imagine him snap his fingers, saying the word. And guess what? What happens to the chariots? All the wheels fall off. Now, wouldn't that have been fun to see? They're going through the midst of the Red Sea, and they're like, all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. You ever have a flat tire? Can I tell you, it probably felt a lot better than a chariot wheel falling off. Okay? Some of you may be old enough to have ridden in a wagon when the wheel fell off or something like that, okay? Boom, boom, boom. And here's what the Bible says. He troubled them so much, the wheels fell out, they had to drive them heavily. Do you realize what they tried to keep doing? Boom, boom. Oh, okay, let's keep going. And they're driving them, and they're dragging. You can imagine what that was like. And all of a sudden, now listen to me, okay? If we all went outside and we looked at our cars and somebody had a flat tire, like, oh, man, that stinks. Glad it's not me. Some of you would say that. But what if we went outside and we looked at every car and every single car had a flat tire? You know what I'd say? we all better get back in here till we get what God wants us to get. Because that doesn't happen by accident. God must have a reason for this if that happened, or there might be somebody out there that has it in for you and I. Now listen to me. As they're in the middle of the Red Sea, all the chariot wheels fall off. They're trying to get across here, and that's it. We're done. Enough is enough. Egyptians look around, and you know what they said? Don't miss it. Here's what they said. Here was their conclusion. Here is what they judged. So that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel. Why? They have a rock. For the Lord fighteth for them against us. Man, they got a rock. And that rock is greater than our rock. That rock is greater than our rock. You say, well, Pastor Henry, I haven't had any enemies say that. Oh, but you've had other people in your life who come along and they've said something to the effect of this. I don't know how you could go through that. I don't know how you're keeping it together in this situation. I don't know how you always smile and have a smile on your face no matter what. My friend, that and many more are instances and situations where I'll tell you, you know what they're saying? You have a rock. A rock like none other. You have a rock. You see, the unsaved, whose rock is not God, they look at your rock and they say, wow, that's pretty powerful, pretty faithful, and ought not to be forgotten. It ought not to be forgotten. And as Moses waxed eloquent about his rock, he says there's some dangers to be aware of, friends. What are they? Well, he sounds the alarm. Look at verse 15 quickly. Verse 15, notice it. But Jeshurun, that's a term of endearment for Israel. But Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. Thou art waxen fat. Thou art grown thick. Thou art covered with fatness. My friends, I think we get the idea, don't we? Okay? I may be slow, but I can pick it up when it's repeated that often. You are thick, fat, and slow. That's what he says. Slow to what? Slow to get to your rock. You are, and we would put it into more politically correct terms, right? You're comfortable. You're so comfortable. What's happened? Then he forsook God which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. You see what a danger is? Moses here tells them, you grow comfortable in life, and in doing so, you wax fat, as it says here. You grow thick. You're covered with fatness. You forsake your rock. You lightly esteem your rock. What does it mean to lightly esteem? It literally means to undervalue, underuse, and underappreciate your rock, to not take full advantage of it. And boy, did Israel do that. And how you and I can do the same with our rock. We'll look other places for safety. We'll hide in other things. We'll turn to other people for salvation. We'll try to find strength in ourselves instead of our rock. And my friend, can I tell you, we've grown in this life to be fat. We've grown to be thick and too comfortable if we do not run to our rock. Because we come to the point where we lightly esteem the rock of our salvation, we forsake him. Look at verse number 18. He adds a second danger quickly. Of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten God that formed thee. Danger number 2 is to become unmindful of my rock. Literally, my mind is not dwelling upon him. It's not full of him, and to forget him. It does not mean to forget that God exists. Note it. It means to forget that I need to insert God into my life. That he's my rock. That on a daily basis, I need to wake up and run to my rock. I need to go to the rock of my life. He doesn't come first. And a great way to test this is, boy, when you had trouble this week, who did you first turn to? Was it a family member or a coworker who you knew you had their ear, you could gripe to, you could complain to, or maybe they do something for you, help you? What was it, your own strength you turned to? Who did you first call out to? Who did you first look to? You see, Moses says, be careful. You forget God in such a way that He's not your first consideration when you need to hide, when you need to find safety, when you need to find salvation and strength. Paul was warning Israel because he didn't want that new generation going into the promised land to forget their rock. My friend, I would join him today. You say, what is my desire? My prayer for you today is what is said of Israel in Psalm 78:35. It says this, and they remembered that God was their rock. And my prayer for you today is that you wake up tomorrow and the day after and you remember, I have a rock. My God is my rock. And there I can find safety, and there I can hide, and there I can find salvation, and there I can find strength for every day. My prayer is that you remember your rock. My prayer is that you avoid the dangers. Don't get too comfortable in life where you forsake and lightly esteem your rock, where you finally seldom find yourself running to your rock. Don't get too comfortable. Don't get too unmindful of Him on a daily basis. Don't forget to ensure that your rock is in your life every day. Could I just encourage you? Would you make it a practice, a daily practice, to run to the rock that is higher than I? Run to the rock that is higher than I. I leave you with this. Psalm 18:46. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock. The God of my salvation be exalted.